The Wedding March, the soundtrack to Saying I Do. Written by Felix Mendelssohn. He's been called the second Mozart, one of history's great musical prodigies. But Felix wasn't the only Mendelssohn genius. His sister Fanny composed over 460 works. Some, we now know, were even published under Felix's name. While he was celebrated, she was erased. This is the story of the other Mendelssohn, the one history wrote out of the books. Fanny Mendelssohn. She was born in Hamburg, Germany in 1805, 4 years before her brother, who history would go on to remember as one of the greats. But actually, Fanny was just as great, and she collaborated on his body of work their entire lives. From the very beginning, music was in her blood. By 13, she could play Bach's well-tempered clavier entirely from memory. A feat so difficult, even professional musicians struggled with it. She and Felix were trained side by side. Their mother gave them their first piano lessons. They studied under Berlin's best teachers, even traveling to Paris for advanced training. The verdict? Felix was brilliant. But Fanny was just as brilliant, maybe more. One of their teachers even wrote to the great German poet and thinker Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, a cultural icon of the era, declaring that she plays like a man, which in the 1800s was apparently the highest compliment they could think to give a girl. From the start, it was clear. There wasn't just one Mendelssohn prodigy, there were two. So if both siblings were extraordinary, why did history only remember one? The Mendelssohns weren't just any family. They were wealthy, educated, and constantly surrounded by art and ideas. Daily visitors to their Berlin home included philosophers, writers, and musicians. Inside that world, both siblings thrived. Musically, Fanny was just as technically talented as Felix, sometimes even more so. Teachers and critics noticed. Her family knew it. Even Felix leaned on her opinions when shaping his own works. But societal norms meant different paths for each Mendelssohn child. In 19th century Europe, a boy could continue training to become a master at his craft. But for a girl, music could only be a pastime. Fanny's own father wrote to her in 1820, quote, "Music will perhaps become Felix's profession, while for you, it can and must be only an ornament, never the root of your being and doing." So Fanny kept her passion and talents alive the only way society deemed appropriate. She played music at home. Felix toured Europe, conducting orchestras and dazzling crowds, a life that Fanny, his equal in talent, his trusted critic, was not allowed to have. But still, her music reached the world, just not under her own name. At least 6 of her songs were published as Felix's, slipped into his Opus 8 and Opus 9. In 1831, the London journal The Harmonicon even wrote, quote, "3 of the best of Felix's 12 songs are by his sister, a young lady of great talents and accomplishments." And then the moment that exposed the truth on the grandest stage. In 1842, Queen Victoria told Felix she wanted to sing one of her favorite songs called Italienne. That's when Felix admitted the truth. It wasn't his, it was Fanny's. Imagine having the Queen of England swoon over your music, only to have the whole rest of the world think someone else composed it. Felix leaned on Fanny constantly, sending her drafts of his compositions, asking for feedback, relying on her ear. Fanny once wrote of her brother, quote, "He never writes down a thought before submitting it to my judgment. I have known his operas by heart before a note was written." Think about that. Fanny helped compose music that's still, to this day, only attributed to Felix. And while their music filled Europe's concert halls, Fanny was confined to her living room. In 1831, Fanny began hosting weekly salons in her Berlin home, intimate concerts that became the beating heart of the city's cultural life. She programmed the music, conducted, and performed her own works. Her husband, artist Wilhelm Hensel, would even decorate the room like a live stage. Invitations were coveted by Berlin's elite. It wasn't until 1846, with her husband's encouragement, that Fanny finally published music under her own name, a quiet act of rebellion. 40 years old, finally claiming authorship. But the victory was heartbreakingly brief. 1 year later, she collapsed and died of a stroke while rehearsing one of her brother's cantatas. She was 41. Felix was shattered, and within 6 months, he was dead too. 2 siblings bound by music. One remembered forever. One nearly erased. And it wasn't until the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, when East German archives opened, that the full scope of Fanny's compositions finally came to light. Music historians uncovered the hundreds of pieces she had written, from lieder to choral works to chamber music, revealing a career that had always been there, hidden until now. For over a century, the world got one Mendelssohn. It could have had 2. So next time you hear the wedding march, remember the other Mendelssohn. Thank you, Fanny Mendelssohn. Your music lives on, and so does your story.